The Premier League is back this weekend after the Community Shield at the weekend. Daniel Harris is with us this morning. We wanted essentially, Daniel, to talk at the start of this about the doomsday clock and how it's ticking for Jose Mourinho. What's your take? What's the general sense of how much longer we're going to have Jose Mourinho as the manager of Manchester United?
It's really hard to know. I think there are some of the things you would look for in him manufacturing an escape, as in getting annoyed all the time, creating what looks to be a bad atmosphere by complaining all the time, creating aggravation with the board. But at the same time, those are things that you feel kind of need to be done, really. And the players don't necessarily seem to be finding him too much of a problem, in that things that you hear from people that know players and that kind of thing say that people seem to be quite happy inside the squad. But I would say the biggest red flag for me, actually, was how United played against Bayern Munich on Sunday, where they looked absolutely clueless, absolutely devoid of any kind of plan, and seems unlikely that even Mourinho told them to go out there and play like that. It seems unlikely that he would have said to them, "Listen, lads, we need some transfers. Go and camp on the edge of your box for 90 minutes. Don't pass the ball to each other, and then that'll be fine." And I wouldn't really want to get too excited about a pre-season friendly, and would, I guess, frown upon people who do. Except this was so unfathomably bad that it was impossible not to watch it and be concerned if you're bothered about how United are going to do.
A couple of quick things on this. Somewhere in the dusty recesses of my mind, there's a sense that Jose Mourinho did have a power struggle against an executive at Real Madrid, which ultimately he won, and that gave him a little bit longer at Madrid and gave him access to the players that he wanted before he does actually win a league there. So maybe there's some method to this, and he is in the midst of a power struggle against Ed Woodward and somehow believes that he'll be the one that comes out the right side of that. And then the other side is that it's hard to know how much he still actually likes being a football manager.
Yeah, for sure, and how much he likes football. I think that it's weird to see Mourinho as any kind of crusader, because Mourinho is not really a crusader for anything but Mourinho. But the underfunding of United, and I know people say, well, United spent this and they've spent that. They've spent a lot less than Manchester City, and that's the team they have to keep. That's the team they have to catch. City won the league last season. United finished second. They finished a distant second. And you can look at the squad and say Mourinho should be getting more out of the squad than he is. But anyone sensible would also look at the squad and say Fred, Dalot and Lee Grant are not, and whichever centre-back arrives, were not the difference between United and City. And in the end, there's a conflict of interest between Mourinho, who wants to win things, and I guess the supporters who want to win things, and Ed Woodward and the Glazers, who want to make as much money as they possibly can. And the amount of money that you have to invest to perhaps then go and win the league is significant, and it's not enough more than the amount of money that you can just claim by constantly finishing in the top four, which United look likely to do. So if you are Ed Woodward and you've got instructions to maximise returns for the Glazers, or if you're the Glazers and all you care about is maximising returns, and we can see that that's all they care about from the other various sports teams that they have, then why would they invest? They invest enough to stay in the top four, because you have to do that to keep the cash machine ticking over. But anything beyond that is a gamble, and not a gamble that's particularly rewarding.
Do Ed Woodward and the Glazers not want to protect their reputation to a certain extent as well? That's as important to them as profit. And in a very subtle way, or maybe a not so subtle way, Jose Mourinho is sort of chiselling away at that a little bit and sort of saying to the supporters, well, here is your Fred, here is your Lee Grant, whatever. These are terrible signings. It's not my fault.
I don't think these people have reputations. When the day that the Glazers bought United, they're left in a police van. They've taken all manner of abuse. They don't speak to the supporters. They very rarely turn up at Old Trafford. They're not bothered by what supporters think of them, because if they were, they'd have been gone a long time ago. And unfortunately, they're pretty well insulated from what supporters think, because they're, wherever they are, enjoying their money. And so, no, I don't really think they care at all about their reputation. And I think that you see also, and it's dissimilar but similar, you look at Daniel Levy at Tottenham. Daniel Levy's reputation is about making money for Joe Lewis and Enoch. It's not about what Tottenham win, because they don't win anything. But what they do is they're a well-run club who are making money, who are improving, and that looks good for Daniel Levy. These guys are businessmen. They're not sportsmen. So their success, their sporting glory is in a profit and loss sheet, it's in a balance sheet, it's in accounts. It's not into delivering value. It's not in what's on the honours board at the club, because that's what players do. That's not what these guys do. And the Glazers bought United because they saw that relative to American sport, United was undervalued. It was a huge worldwide brand. It was undervalued. They saw lots of ways that they could very easily start increasing profit, because they did it in the States. So before the Glazers took over, football clubs would have one sponsor, basically. United was sponsored by Sharp, or whoever it was, Vodafone, I think it probably was at the time. What the Glazers came in and did is they sponsored the seats that the managers sit on. They sponsor the training kit. They have a tie with Mr. Potato Head, and all these kinds of things, and it's money and money and money and money. And they saw that no one was exploiting those things in football. And so that's what they came in and did. I guess, I might be wrong, my guess is they probably thought that the TV deal was going to be broken up by then as well, which hasn't happened, but there have been so many other ways of making money, and the foreign market in TV rights has exploded to such unfathomable extent that United is basically a cash machine for them. And United is such a big name that they're able to wear a certain level of deterioration in success. And as long as United are in the top four and giving the pretense of getting close to winning things, then that's still a lot of money that the Glazers can keep making without actually having to take the final step. Whereas if you look at Manchester City, it's different. City is the PR wing of a repressive oil regime. They need to win things. They don't just need to be getting into the top four, because that is something different. Like, the people who own City have an entirely different level of money. They're a state. And so what they need to do is they need to win things. And they need to spend whatever it takes to win things. And that's what you're seeing from City. And if you look somewhere else, and you look at Chelsea, what Chelsea did is they've got a guy who no one's heard of, but who knows people who keep getting bumped off. So all of a sudden, now people know who Roman Abramovich is. If Roman Abramovich vanishes off the face of the earth, then people are actually going to notice that he's not there, which previously wasn't the case. So Chelsea won things for a bit, but he's now not investing in Chelsea in the way that he was before, because he's probably achieved what his primary aim was in owning Chelsea. And what we're actually seeing is the way that our football clubs, these century-old institutions, have been absolutely hammered by people with no interest in football whatsoever. And the FA sat there and did nothing. The Premier League sat there and did nothing. And actually the government sat there and did nothing as well. And we're seeing, I know I'm ranting, but we're seeing what's happening again with Arsenal now, where Alisher Usmanov, who's someone who should never have been allowed anywhere near a football club, is selling out to Stan Kroenke, who's someone who should never have been allowed anywhere near a football club. And what he's going to do is he's going to take Arsenal private, and there's going to be no fan support of shareholders. And again, he's going to be able to do whatever he wants with this franchise, in inverted commas, which is actually the heritage of people's lives. And we're going to see the same thing with Arsenal.
The one counter argument to the Arsenal situation is that actually I think Stan Kroenke is going to invest money in that, because he believes the best way of creating value is to make the team an exciting team to watch. If you look at what he's done in LA, he's signed a bunch of the best players and hired the youngest, most exciting coach that was available to him, and has tried to put bums on seats, because that's what they need to do in LA. They're building a new stadium, and it's not a million miles away from the situation that Arsenal are going to find themselves in. I'd be terribly surprised if he just maintains Arsenal at that kind of crappy level that they're at the moment, and that actually he tries to go and win, because that's the quickest way to close the gap on the amount of money that's being generated by Manchester United.
Well, that's kind of the thing at the moment. That is, to start with the first point, is when all this kind of thing started happening, there were 4 teams. You just had to be one of them. Now there are 6 teams. So 2 big teams are going to miss out. So in order to be part of that, you do have to spend money in order to get into the Champions League, which is what people need. But what you said about bums on seats, I don't think is quite right now, because actually TV revenue is far outstripping bums on seats in terms of what these clubs need. So you might want TV bums on seats, which is slightly different, but then how much is it going to cost to go and watch Arsenal? And it's already expensive to watch Arsenal. And if I was an Arsenal fan, I guess that's the main thing that I'd be worrying about. As a supporter of a football club, so if you go to the games, the main thing you're thinking is, what is my match ticket going to cost? And I would be surprised if that didn't increase now that Kroenke is going to own the entirety of Arsenal, because he's probably also thinking about this American revenue system where you charge insane amounts of money. And I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But I would be surprised if we suddenly saw Stan Kroenke spending Manchester City or even Manchester United levels of money.
I do wonder though, because if you're the Glazers and so you've already created the situation where you can milk as much revenue out of the team as you possibly can. At some point, you want to increase the value, and the only way in football really to increase the value and to grow the brand is to win, surely. The point you made about the brand being so big that they can have a little bit of creep over a period of time where they're not actually winning stuff, it's not that long. You can't go that long without suddenly becoming a sad case like the great Liverpool team who used to win the league and be competitive. Like, it took them, it was 2 decades of creep there before actually they become a team who are credible again. If that was to happen at Manchester United, I don't know if they're going to continue to sell bedspreads in Indonesia.
Well, I don't think it's about the bedspreads in Indonesia anymore. It's about the TV revenue, and that's not going to change. So you might lose some money here and there, but if you said, right, if the Glazers said to Jose Mourinho, we will give you money to buy every player that you want, would you be certain that United would win the league or the Champions League?
No.
So it's a gamble.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very expensive gamble. And if you're the Glazers, I mean, particularly to bring it back to Mourinho and actually football rather than stuff on balance sheets that, as a football writer, as a football supporter, I don't really feel I should even have to talk about, never mind know about, read about. I mean, it tells you where we are, the fact that we're even having this conversation here. But you wouldn't, if you're the Glazers, and I don't want to look at it from their point of view at all, but you do have this notoriously fickle manager who looks like he's starting to move the pieces around to get himself out of there. You might be reticent to give him money. And let's say that's the case. If that is the case, then you've got to move. You've got to get rid of him.
Well, so you're exactly right? And so my point, I guess, John W. Henry is a better example of this, where they found a manager who actually can be this totemic, unifying figure and plays a style of football that makes people, the metaphorical bums on seats around the world, go, I want to be a Liverpool fan again. That actually, that's the type of thing, if I was Stan Kroenke or if I was the Glazers, I'd be like, I want some of that. That's the type of manager that I want. That's the kind of club that I want to own.
Yeah, that's true. But then again, I'll ask the same question. Do you think Liverpool are going to win the league or the Champions League under Klopp?
I think they have a chance.
I don't think that they will. Like, unless Guardiola goes somewhere quite quickly, I don't think that will happen. I might be wrong.
They might win the Champions League. There's a it's not ridiculous to think that maybe the next time they're in the Champions League final, their goalkeeper doesn't get concussed.
I don't think that wasn't why they won. That was why they didn't win the Champions League. What I would say about that is, I looked at the odds before that Champions League and I thought there is some money to be had here, because how badly Real Madrid would have to play to get beat by Liverpool. But obviously the goalkeeper did do some stuff, and although I felt that allowed people to divert attention away from the fact that they just got beaten by a far, far superior team with far, far superior players. But Liverpool might win the league under Klopp, they might not, but I don't think that they're going to also, like, the money that they spend now, I don't think that money is going to continue. Like, this is the money that he's getting. And then at what point does Klopp become under pressure? If he spends all this money and they don't win the thing, I don't know, like, is like jumping around and sound bites going to be enough to prevent him from getting fired?
No.
Like, if you're asking me as a football writer, I would say it should, because if he applied for his own job, would he get it? Yes. And who are you going to get who's better? And I think that is one of the problems that United find as well with Mourinho, that you have people that don't know anything whatsoever about football who are running the club. So if they decided they wanted to get rid of Mourinho, then who are they going to get? And if you have people that don't know anything about football, they're not going to be, well, there's a really good manager at Aberdeen who's done really well and who's broken the old firm in Scotland. Let's go and get him. It'll just be another name, because there's no one who really knows anything about football who's involved with the club. So I think that if I was Ed Woodward, or not if I was Ed Woodward, I would imagine that Ed Woodward would be quite terrified about what would happen if Mourinho left, because he'd be looking at a better the devil you know, and that would be, if Mourinho left United right now, that would be Moyes was a failure, Van Gaal was a failure, that would be Mourinho leaving as a failure. If you're responsible for these failures, then at what point are you yourself a failure, and are you going to be allowed to appoint another person who might be a failure? So there's a lot of ego and a lot of selfish desires and needs that are involved in this whole miserable circle jerk of nonsense. And how it's resolved is very difficult to see, because it's the same idiots making the same idiotic decisions. And so it's really hard to actually know on whose side one should be, because Mourinho should be getting way more out of the players that he's got, and should be creating a better atmosphere around the team. And there are just lots of little things that you see that you think that doesn't feel quite right. Even something really small, like Antonio Valencia, he accused of having too much holiday, which was quite a funny line. But he's now injured. United don't have a right back. But what's he done? He's playing Matteo Darmian, who is rubbish and who wants to leave. He sent Axel Tuanzebe and Tim Fosu-Mensah on loan. And I understand why he's done that. They're two promising young players. They need to play. But I can't help but wonder if, I mean, you always go back to what would Fergie do in this situation. I feel like I should get it tattooed on my wrist. But would he take one of those two players and coach them and say, okay, I'm going to play Tuanzebe, or I'm going to play Fosu-Mensah at right back. I'm going to coach them or have them be coached, and I'm going to trust them. Squads were much smaller in 98, 99, but when United didn't have a right back, Fergie played Wes Brown. And maybe Wes Brown was a more promising teenager than these two guys, who knows, but I don't really see where playing Matteo Darmian is going to get anyone. And I don't really see where playing Antonio Valencia is going to get anyone either. I mean, a winger who wasn't good enough to play for United when he was a winger is now a fullback who's not good enough to play for United and he's old. And you see Mourinho making these very conservative decisions and wonder about where he sees it all going and where does he see his future, because he's not investing particularly in these players apart from Scott McTominay, who is nowhere near the standard of a United player from what we've seen. And Mourinho giving Scott McTominay United's Player of the Year, his Manager's Player of the Year award, seems to be the closest he could get to awarding it to himself. On the other hand, and you can look on the bright side, there is a bright side that you could look on, is that if Fred is good enough, then he's precisely the kind of player that United needed. He's quick, he's strong, he has a very good eye for an early pass, he can run with the ball, and he should be able to join together a midfield that meant when Pogba wasn't there or when Pogba wasn't playing well, United couldn't play through midfield. So it's possible that Fred will make that a lot better and then get more out of Pogba. It's likely that Lukaku will be better next season. There's no way Alexis Sanchez can be as bad as he was, and he's looked really good in pre-season. So there are things, but it's hard to see that those things will be sufficient with a manager who doesn't quite appear to be creating the environment around the squad that you'd like there to be.
Daniel, just before we wrap up, I just wanted to get your take on the transfer window in general, because when it comes to moving forward into the 21st century and beyond, it seems like the Premier League have got a lot right, but it does seem this idea of bringing the transfer window and closing it before the start of the Premier League season is going to be a bit of a disaster. Like the Thibaut Courtois situation just puts this into a microcosm perfectly. The idea that Chelsea might not sign a replacement goalkeeper this week because they don't know if he's going to stay or go, and Real Madrid have got an extra 3 weeks on Chelsea to sign him, and essentially the Premier League have given them a leg down, so to speak, against clubs in La Liga.
Yeah, that's true. You don't want to put yourself at a competitive disadvantage to other teams, particularly really like Real Madrid and Barcelona are more or less the only teams that can financially muscle English clubs off their best players. On the other hand, with particularly the Courtois situation, from what you hear, he told Chelsea a long time ago that he wanted to do one. So they've known about this for a long time, and Sarri's decided that he must have this face-to-face meeting with him, and that's why this has taken so long. So I think that at some point, Sarri probably should have thought, this guy's gone, so just get on with it. And it's an interesting situation, actually, Sarri at Chelsea, because we watched Chelsea against City the other day, and obviously City are the best team around, and so it wasn't surprising to see what they did. But watching Chelsea play, you kind of felt like this is a guy who has this particular way of playing that is connected to how he feels about football, which then makes it connected to ego, trying to impose this particular style on a squad that doesn't have the players to wear it, and he's not going to be given the money to buy the players to fit his style. So it felt like it's quite hard to see how that will work for Chelsea this season, because when Conte came in, he tried to play 4-3-3 or whatever it was, and then he thought, well, actually, I'm going to play this way. And at the time, when he first did it, I think people thought, this is how Conte likes to play. He likes to play 3 at the back, so that's what he's going to do. But then you actually watch Chelsea play, and you thought, well, what he's actually done here is he's got David Luiz, he's a liability in a 2, he's played him in a 3, he's getting the most out of a really talented player. He's not got Eden Hazard stuck out on the left wing anymore because he's too good. He needs to be on the ball in the middle of the pitch. And Sarri seems to be devising a way of playing, imposing a way of playing that is going to put his best players, David Luiz, Hazard, even Azpilicueta, into positions that don't suit them. And it's hard to see how that's going to work well for him. But Yeah, the Premier League made a mistake, which is the short answer to your original question after I've blathered for far too long there.
Daniel, great stuff. Enjoy. Thanks a million.
All right, see you again.
Daniel Harris giving us some pre-season thoughts ahead of the Premier League return this weekend.
Yeah, I'm not sure that a Freudian slip that the Premier League has just turned into kind of a Champions League sort of preamble, maybe from. There's only 6 clubs. That's all we're going to be talking about for the rest of the season, isn't it? Unless your boys Everton. Well, I call them your boys, considering you were kind of on their bandwagon last year with Sam Allardyce. Might manage to break the mould, or Burnley managed to break the mould. It's often something that kind of gives an Arsenal fan a little bit of concern after what happened last year.
There might only be 5 teams though. Chelsea might not be a team this year.
Well, I think that's a big leap to make given the manager they've got. He probably has not got anywhere near enough time to turn them into a team that might be able to challenge the top 2 or 3, but I would think that he's a good enough manager to be able to keep them in the top 5.